A putia a maki hoki. Welcome to the Finance and Performance Committee. Ngā mihi ki a koe, te wiki o te reo Māori. Greetings everybody, this is Māori Language Week. I don't know why I always get Māori Language Week, but I do. So it's wonderful to see those of you who are here in person, thank you very much. And those of you online, of course, the state of where we've been over the past 3 years. To honour Te Wiki Tia Reo Māori, Māori Language Week, I'd like to share a whakatauki or proverb, and it goes like this. E orea te tuatara ka patu ki waho, and the translation is, a problem is solved by continuing to find solutions. So this whakatauki captures, in my opinion, the need for creative thinking, adaptability and perseverance in times of strife. All qualities this committee has drawn on through the many difficulties of this term. So even though our resources may be stretched, through creativity and out-of-the-box thinking, it has been possible to achieve great things. So during our hui today, I encourage you all to use te reo Māori as much as you want. Kia kaha te reo Māori, may the Māori language be strong. Mi tīmata tātou, let's get started. And I will hand to Sandra for the roll call. Thank you.
Morena members. Mayor Goff.
Kia ora koutou.
Councillor Cashmore.
Kia ora.
Councillor Bartley. MSB member Blair.
Kia ora koutou.
Councillor Casey.
Morena Sandra.
Morena. Councillor Collins.
Kia ora koutou.
Councillor Combe.
Kia ora koutou ke kone au.
Councillor Cooper.
Kia ora mai tātou katoa.
Councillor Dalton.
Kia ora koutou.
Councillor Darby.
Morena.
Councillor Filipina.
Morena koutou.
Councillor Fletcher, apology for lateness, Madam Chair. Councillor Henderson.
Morena koutou.
Councillor Hills.
Kia ora koutou katoa.
Councillor Mulholland.
Morena.
Councillor Newman. Councillor Sayers.
Good morning, Chair and in person.
Councillor Stewart.
Good morning, but can you please speak up? I could hear you very clearly before, but it's all gone very quiet.
Thank you. Councillor Walker.
Morning.
Councillor Watson.
Kia ora koutou.
MSB Chair David Taipari.
Morena koutou.
Councillor Young.
Kia ora, tā tātou.
Thank you. Back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Apologies. As there, I'd like to move the apologies for lateness from Councillor Fletcher and Councillor Newman. Deputy Chair will second.
Early departure for 1:45, Madam Chair, on council business.
Thank you, Councillor. Hopefully that won't be the case. Forever hopeful. Right, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favour say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Councillor Hills?
Richard here. I wrote in the chat that I just have to drop off at 11 a.m. for 10-15 minutes for a media conversation.
Thank you, Councillor. That will be noted. If you just write in the chat when you're going and then come back on chat, staff will be able to follow that specifically. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I'll do the same. It's MSB member Blair here.
Oh, thanks, Member Blair. As I said, just pop it in the chat when you're going and pop it back when you're back in. Thank you. Any others? Right, committee members, we have 2 acknowledgements today. The first acknowledgement is in sympathy of the passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, and I'll hand to the Mayor now to say a few words on behalf of us all. Thank you, Your Worship.
Kia ora, inga mana, inga reo. E rau rangatira mā, tēnā koutou katoa. E te rangatira Queen Elizabeth II, haere, haere, haere atu rā, moi mai, moi mai, moi mai. Thank you, Madam Chair, and it is a solemn moment in the life of this council and of our city and of our country, with the passing of our Queen and our Head of State, Queen Elizabeth II. Generally, a person living into their 90s is regarded as having lived a long life, and their passing, when it happens, is sad, but not unexpected. Queen Elizabeth, at 96 years old, had noticeably suffered from declining health over the last year, but when she passed Sunday, United Kingdom time, the impact on us, on the United Kingdom, of course, and of the world was profound. And the reason is understandable. She'd been our sovereign for over 70 years. There's no one in this room, just checking around, that remembers a time when Queen Elizabeth II was not our monarch. As our Head of State, through times that were often turbulent, she has been a constant, a stable, and a reassuring presence. Non-elected and above politics, she was able to represent the values that we hold in common. She was a unifying rather than a divisive part of our society and our lives. At the somewhat tender age of 21, and there'll be a few of us thinking about what we might have been thinking and doing at age 21, she gave a hugely impressive speech in which she stated, and I quote, "I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be short or long, shall be devoted to your service." It was a pledge that she honoured right to the end of her life. Through her devotion to her duties, her integrity and her dignity, she earned the respect of us all. At this point, Madam Chair, I believe that we have a video that we will show, but just to foreshadow, at the conclusion of that, I'll add a few comments. I'll ask for a minute's silence, and then following that minute's silence, I would also like to make an acknowledgement of our new Head of State, King Charles III. Madam Chair, back to you. Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I think those brief clips are a reminder of just how much life has changed in our city while she's been the Queen of New Zealand. And I think I was 6 months old on her first royal tour. Most of you weren't born. I remember being at primary school on her second tour, and then the subsequent tours, of which I was able to meet with her on a number of occasions. Shortly, I'd like to add some words about her successor and our new King and Head of State, King Charles III. But before I do that, I'd ask all of you to join with me and to extend to the royal family our sympathy and our sense of loss for the passing of Queen Elizabeth II, to show our gratitude for the service that she gave to our nation, and to express our sadness at her passing. I would ask you please to stand for a minute's silence as we remember her. Thank you very much. Madam Chair, I'd like now, on our behalf, to extend our congratulations and best wishes to King Charles III as he embarks on a challenging role that he has ahead of him. He said in his recent comments after the passing of the Queen that he would seek to serve as king in the same manner as his mother, with full devotion to the duties that he will carry out. While he has served a very long apprenticeship for the position that he has now ascended to, becoming a new monarch and adapting that role to contemporary and modern realities will indeed be challenging. I had the privilege, while serving in Parliament, to spend 3/4 of an hour in conversation with the then Prince of Wales. And I've got to say, I came away incredibly impressed by that experience. And as you're probably aware, I'm not easily impressed meeting people that might be holding positions that are important positions. But he impressed me as being incredibly well informed, of being really engaged and interested in the issues that we were talking about. And on critical matters, things that we are now debating and are on our agenda, such as sustainability of our environment and climate change, he took a stand more than 30 years ago that showed that he was really ahead of his time. In fact, so far ahead of his time that he earned some unfair criticism for the views that he was putting forward. Those views today are now regarded as mainstream. So I have some personal confidence that he will carry out his duties in an exemplary manner and follow in the best traditions of his mother, the late Queen. With your agreement, Madam Chair, and that of our Council, I will send to the new King a message from our Council of our condolences first and foremost, but also of our best wishes to him as he starts out on his new role. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Worship. God save the King. We move on now to declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest in today's agenda? Yes, there are.
Yes, it's OMSB member Blair. I have an interest in the Eden Park, which I will actually jump offline once they're presenting.
Kia ora. Thank you, Member Blair. We now go to confirmation of minutes, and we have minutes to confirm from the 26th of July, both open and confidential. I'd like to move those minutes. Deputy Chair, do I have a seconder? Thank you. All those in favour say aye.
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 Against? Carried. Thank you. I have received no petitions. I have received no public input or local board input. I know of no extraordinary items. We will now move to item 8, which is the presentation from Eden Park Trust Board, and I would invite John Bishop, our Group Treasurer, to introduce this item. Thank you, John. Would you like some water?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Marina all. So this presentation today from Eden Park stems from the 2019 resolution of this committee, which invites the Eden Park Trust Board to report to this committee on at least a 6-monthly basis. The recovery report, which I'll go through, talks about 3 items: an update on the loan to Eden Park, an update on the development funding agreement, and an update on the operating partnering proposal. Just a reminder that this is not the time to discuss the merits or otherwise of any future funding. First of all, with regard to the loan, the balance at the end of August this year remains stable at 48.75 million. As we've done previously during COVID times, we have extended the covenant waiver, most recently in May 22, and we've extended it out to October 23. It should be noted that at the most recent reporting date, which in fact we've received one subsequent to the writing of this paper, Eden Park were complying with the covenant. Moving on to the development funding agreement that was initially approved for 9.8 million. To date, Eden Park have spent 9.797 million, so virtually all the 9.8. They have confirmed that all the projects have been completed with the exception of 2, and that no future funding will be sought from Council in relation to these projects. In relation to the operating partnering proposal, Eden Park Trust Board continues to work with Auckland Limited and intends to engage with the new council on this matter in November or December of this year. Look, I'll now hand over to Eden Park to begin their presentation. At the end of their presentation, I'm happy to come back and answer any questions on the council report. So on that note, I'll hand over to Brett Stanley to introduce the Eden Park team.
Thank you, John, and we welcome Nick Sortner, Chief Executive of Eden Park, along with Brett Stanley, the CFO, and we have on screen the Chair, Doug Mackay. Welcome, gentlemen.
Morena, thank you. And as you've mentioned, Madam Chair, Nick Sortner to my right, CEO, and Doug Mackay, the Chairman, on the screen. Just like to start with a brief summary of our financial performance. Slide on the screen includes a summary of our annual report result from last year. We've previously presented this information to the council report. It was released in January of this year. In going into the 2022 financial year, we faced a number of challenges, obviously with the situation regarding COVID, and we budgeted a profit before depreciation of $556,000. The numbers to the right, the forecast for the financial year, include the additional funding we've received from council grants and government COVID grants. They're noted at the bottom, 4.222 million and 181,000. So please bear those in mind when you review the profit before depreciation forecast for the year of $5.813 million. So net of the 2 grant figures, we're currently forecasting a budgeted profit before depreciation of around 1.4 million, which is a good position to be in, bearing in mind the budget figure of 556. We've had the benefit, perhaps we could move to the next slide, the benefit of some tailwinds during the year. So the major factors to consider for the current financial year is that the COVID restrictions, which came on board in August of last year, were eased in April 2022. We did go through a couple of events under COVID restrictions, under the pod system. The Women's Cricket World Cup had restricted numbers in attendance, as did the very beginning of the Super Rugby season. We also had a concert budgeted for April, and it has been postponed until November, which is after our financial year end. However, in our favour, we did have the 3 Super Rugby playoff matches, where the Blues had a very successful season, and of course that was a financial boost to us, and there was a very strong interest in the Ireland versus All Blacks test match played in July. Still to come in the year, we have an all-whites fixture on the same weekend, the day after the Bledisloe Cup test, on the 24th and 25th of September. And I think it's important to note also that despite the difficult trading conditions, our commercial partner base has remained loyal and has in fact grown during the year. I'll just hand over to our CEO to comment on the next slide.
Morena koutou, and thank you, Mayor Goff, for your comments this morning. In relation to this slide, we just wanted to give a context of our work with Auckland Limited and the economic benefit arising, as Brett mentioned, of the strong interest in the All Blacks versus Ireland. Crowd of just under 50,000 attendees. In terms of the visitors, we see that the area attracted around 10,000 from the region for the event, generated 15,000 visitor nights and approximately 3.5 million in terms of the tourism expenditure for the area. This is in contrast to 660, our first concert. There was around 5.5 million of economic benefit, so demonstrating some of the benefits for the city arising out of the calendar of content that we've had in the past, but also into the future.
I'd just like to now briefly comment on the grant funding. As Treasurer John Bishop mentioned, we have fully spent the allocation. This agreement expired on the 30th of June. So there's a brief summary of the annual spends culminating in a total of 9.789 million of funding support provided by Council. So our gratitude once again for that support, and to the Council officers who assisted in management of the program throughout the 3-year period.
As Brett mentioned, thank you to all councillors for their support throughout the last 3 years. A number of critical projects have been delivered throughout that period, including full replacement of the field, a number of facilities upgrades, the installation of the super screen as seen and as a criteria for the FIFA Women's World Cup. A number of operational requirements around upgrades to electrical equipment, cybersecurity, turnstiles, our retail food and beverage outlets, public LED installation for bilingual signage on entry, security bollards in line with the crowded places strategy by central government, North Stand lifts, and also the stadium lighting upgrades that have been co-funded by central government and to be completed prior to the FIFA Women's World Cup. I did want to take the opportunity, given it has been a 3-year journey, to talk through some of our achievements and appreciation and engagement with the community. As some councillors will be aware around the table, over the last 3 years we have been on a journey to engage with the community, and one of those programs was the Hood, our Neighbourhood Supporters Club. We now have 1,400 members, 12 schools and 350 businesses integral to the daily operations of Eden Park. A whole range of community initiatives have been implemented, including the City Mission Christmas Appeal, Eid, LifeWise Big Sleep Out. A number of these activities over the last 2 years have been affected by obviously COVID, but we continue with our commitment to work with the community as a strategic asset for New Zealand and a community asset for Auckland. In line with that approach, there is local, regional and national initiatives that we've implemented. Possibly one of the saddest days for me in New Zealand was the passing of Matthew Hunt and the funeral at Eden Park. But in terms of the impact for our police force and our ability to work with the family following such a tragedy is something that I'm sure people will never forget, and the legacy of the blue seat at Eden Park for Matthew Hunt and the family is something that we're all very proud of. We have a number of community initiatives with the Auckland RSA, with community gatherings such as Eid. We reflect on the tragedy of the Christchurch terrorist attack and our ability to host the commemoration service at the park and work with the Muslim community in line with hosting Eid on the 2 occasions each year. With regard to Te Matatini, I had the privilege last night of being at the museum with the Women's World Cup that is under now a month away, and a number of kapahaka groups were performing last night. That is a festival that happens once every 20 years. It has been postponed, but it will be the biggest stage for kapahaka on our national stadium as we deliver that over the next 5 to 6 months. With regard to further community engagement, we're working with the local boards on engagement with Christmas in the Park, community clinics, Te Reo Māori, education sessions, a number of fundraising initiatives for local schools, and the holding of whether it be school assemblies or indeed citizenship ceremonies in consultation with Auckland Council. Again, part of our strategic intent over the last 3 years has been to see greater inclusion and innovation through diversification. That's included the creation of our G9 golf tournament that now we've seen that licensed to Australia. Last weekend we had some councillors attend Art in the Park, a hugely successful initiative for over 100 local artists to showcase their works in. On the second occasion following such a trying period for the art community, and something that we intend now to sign and just have signed a 5-year partnership with moving forward. With regard to the COVID implications for the park, it has seen us look to be nimble, agile, and look at implementing a variety of initiatives that complied with government regulations. Auckland is a great city to live, and the next 12 months is going to be inspiring for everyone. For our team, it has been a very challenging period. We've spoken previously about whether it be salary reductions between 20 to 80%, trustees taking 0 fees, because coming out the other side that we knew we needed to be available to be able to deliver the calendar of content for the city and for the country. A number of those initiatives have then caught the eye of our commercial partners. I was fortunate enough 2 weekends ago to have the president of Samsung fly in for the day to sign an extension of the partnership arrangement with our national stadium. And I am very proud that Brett mentioned earlier that our commercial partners have stood through this challenging time with us, but also have built further engagement and commitment over the next 5 years. The Mayor spoke about sustainability and climate change. Again, we're a lean team at Eden Park, but we've taken a leadership position in this space. The top left-hand corner, for us to be able to save 11 million litres to 16 million litres a year through the reactivation of the bore, through partnerships with council and also Watercare, is something that we see now the entire irrigation of the park through the bore and no town water being used. And that was particularly important, obviously, throughout the last 3 years with the challenges we face with water restrictions in Auckland. The conversion of LED lighting throughout the venue is a journey. We're not there, but we are working towards that, and that will be central also around excuse me, the stadium lights and our ability to reduce our carbon footprint. Waste separation, some councillors might be aware we use school groups and also church groups to separate our waste post-event with donations passed through. We want to be in a situation where we see no single-use waste at Eden Park, and we encourage our hirers to take that leadership position. Some of you may have tasted the 800 jars of honey that are produced each year at Eden Park, with 360,000 bees calling the fortress their home. And our community composting, again, it started with one site, and now, thanks to a local resident living in Remus Avenue with the introduction, we now have 2 sites at the park with 12 refugees working on a daily basis with both the gardening and composting at the site. The future for the city and for Eden Park is bright. We have some wonderful events over the next 12 months, and as I mentioned, we do have a Rugby World Cup in under a month, and I encourage everyone round the table, if you don't have your tickets, please purchase your tickets. This is an opportunity, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for a paradigm shift in sport, with already the Cricket World Cup and then with the 2 Women's World Cups, both cricket with football and rugby. In relation to our calendar of content, we also have the likes of Billy Joel, Ed Sheeran, Guns N' Roses, 660 and Te Matatini all playing within the next 12 months. Events provide escapism, and we feel that we can play a critical part as we rebuild the confidence of the city and the economy. So I again reiterate our thanks to the councillors around the table for their commitment to Eden Park over the last 3 years, and we look forward to working with future councillors around this table on further initiatives to keep Eden Park ahead of the curve.
Thank you very much. That was wonderful. Doug, is there anything else you want to add?
No, Madam Chair, thank you. I think Nick summarised it very well.
Right, any part A or questions for Eden Park? Councillor Fletcher.
It's always pleasing to hear reports on our national stadium. What are the biggest risks that you've identified in moving ahead?
Well, the challenge for us is obviously we've got a detailed calendar of content over the next 12 months, and we need to ensure that we can deliver on the minimum standards required for those events moving forward. So management is working with a variety of parties to ensure that we can deliver what is necessary for that event calendar.
Thank you for the work that you've undertaken this year.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Watson.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, presenters. Pretty impressive smorgasbord of events coming up there, Nick. I just wonder, in terms of the disruption of the last 3 years, and if we take an overview of the content that's coming through, what difference does it make when codes like the Blues have a good year? So it's no secret that we've been up against it for a decade or so. But when they have a bumper year, what difference does that make to the to the finances to the park? And further to that, what do some of these big bumper test matches that we have, like the Irish test match, then make on top of that? So traditionally, and certainly in the last little while, that sort of content has been restricted through one thing or another. When we have those kind of bumper years, what does that do to the finances? And secondly, what does that do to sustaining that if that sort of content then can be rolled out over 2 or 3 years? Say if the Blues, for instance, go on a bit of a winning run.
Thanks for the question, Councillor Watson. As far as Eden Park, as part of our strategic planning, we have a game plan that's values and behaviours, and we want to be the benchmark on and off the field. The reality is we can't necessarily influence the on-field performance, but what we can do is ensure that we provide the best possible fan experience for those attending and also for those internally and externally. So when you have a Blues playing finals, as Brett mentioned, it has a material impact on our membership, our corporate programs, our corporate suite sales, but also onto the community. As you can imagine, Dominion Road and Kingsland over the last 2 years, the hospitality sector has been hamstrung by COVID. So those businesses are just delighted that we are able to welcome back our crowds and be able to deliver those sell-out fixtures. You mentioned the calendar of content as I spoke to. The next 12 months will be our busiest in history, our most challenging in history given the resourcing that we have. But we're looking forward to that challenge, and the last 2 years has been difficult for everyone, particularly the event sector. And for us to have some windfalls around our event content has been certainly pleasing, but the next 12 months is really when we're going to be able to capitalise on the work that has been undertaken at the stadium.
Thank you, Nick and the team. That's really good news for Auckland. Cheers.
Thanks, Councillor, and any advice you can keep giving the Blues to win, I think will be gratefully received by us all. Councillor Sayers, next question is to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Nick and the team. I had a question around the partnerships. You mentioned you had someone fly out from Samsung, etc. Can you give us a bit of an overview in terms of the trends there in terms of those partnerships? Are we likely to be getting more of them? Are they bigger quantum partnerships in terms of financial support? So how do you see that just trending over the next few years in terms of those relationships and any new relationships that might be forming, or ones dropping off potentially? Yeah.
Well, obviously the economic climate of New Zealand and globally has an impact on partners and their decisions. We've been fortunate through the relationships we've forged, whether it be global partners like Samsung and Kia. They've signed on for extended periods, and our local partners, the likes of AA Insurance, they've stayed with us through this challenging time. There will be some changes in our partnership program, and that's just a result of whether it be a different strategic direction by some of our long-term partners, but that'll then hopefully be backfilled by new entrants into the market. So we're confident that with the calendar of content, whether it be in sport or entertainment, in arts or in community, that our partners will continue to work with us on initiatives. So I'm confident that that'll continue to prosper. We made a decision probably close to 5 years ago that Eden Park is an iconic brand globally. We weren't going to sell the naming rights to the stadium, but what we would do is work to develop an icon partner program that delivered a yield, if not equivalent to a naming rights or greater.
Well, thank you for your answer, and I'm very supportive of the recommendation as well, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll ask you to second it then, if that's all right with you, Councillor. Yeah. Councillor Cooper, a question from you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. I just wanted to ask around the dividend that's paid to Auckland Rugby and Auckland Cricket. Have you paid a dividend out to those organisations this last year? And can you tell me how much that is?
There's no such thing as a dividend to Auckland Rugby or Auckland Cricket. Auckland Cricket have entitlements under the trust deed, which they receive in compensation for the beneficial rights which they have foregone in the restatement of the trust deed in 2011. So they receive an annual amount which is stipulated within the trust deed. And Auckland Rugby have far lesser entitlements under the trust deed, but through those entitlements they do receive some benefits in their relationship with New Zealand Rugby, who make those payments to them.
So can you tell me how much, and also is that dependent, the amount or whether they're paid or not, dependent upon whether you've been able to put away depreciation, whether you've got other, I mean, you've clearly got some big projects to do. So are these payments required no matter what? And if so, and obviously that's money that's not going back into the infrastructure of Eden Park, have you had a conversation with the government around, or the trust, about changing that deed? Because that money then is not freed up to maintain and build new infrastructure.
So the answer to the question is the payment to Auckland Cricket's in excess of $300,000 a year, as stipulated within the trust deed, and as I say, it was the agreed compensation for their agreement to forego their rights under the previous trust deed. So it's cut and dried, where there's no discretion in that respect. It's within the statute. It's within the
I understand
trust deed,
that. I just wondered whether you'd had some conversations around freeing up that money, given that you obviously won't have enough unless you draw down the loan
There's no
facility.
there's no conversation to be had with them in that respect, no.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Walker.
Sure, got a couple of questions. Both of them just looking to the future. So we have the situation where the City Rail Link is going to be coming on stream at some point in the future. And quite obviously, that will have a significant impact on transport to Eden Park for any number of events, and I would also anticipate that it will also liven up the offering around Kingsland, because it's going to be incredibly busy there. So is Eden Park actively looking to plan for that, do some foresighting and backcasting on the transport impacts and also the opportunities?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Walker. We're actively engaged with CRL around the impact on our attendees to the venue. Currently, we would see over 60% of our patrons attending the venue via public transport, particularly the rail service. We also are actively engaged with Light Rail and met only this week with the Chair and CEO of the project. Though both projects will have a material impact on the fan experience, but also the connectivity back to the CBD. So it will be critical for our patrons.
Thanks, Nick. The other question I've got goes to your sustainability initiatives. And one thing in particular, there's a literal revolution happening in the electrical vehicle space and also related battery technology and solar. Quite obviously, there's an increased need for EV charging stations around the region. And I wondered if Eden Park had any communications with Tesla and other providers around that could also generate revenue as well as providing a service.
We are exploring options around green energy initiatives and the viability, commercial viability across the board, but also in that space. So yes, we are.
And the last question, just in respect of your sustainability initiatives, on the face of it, they look really world class. Is there any benchmarking across stadiums as it goes to sustainability initiatives?
We work with
internationally.
We were obviously fortunate enough to be the first venue in Australasia to get WELL certification, and we do pride ourselves on taking a leadership position in this area. So we are now working with venues both in Australia and Europe around WELL certification, but a number of other initiatives that we've implemented that they can replicate.
Thank you very much. Commendations.
Thank you. So now we move on to comments or korero. Any comments for Eden Park Trust? I'd like to make one then. Look, thank you very much for your presentation, Nick. To you, Doug, and Brett, thank you for coming today in person. Well, for you and Brett and Doug, thanks for being online. I know it's a tough time for you. Look, Eden Park holds a very special place for us, both in Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland, but in New Zealand as well. Thank you for your important investment into Auckland from you and your team, Nick. You've got a great team. It's a very small team, and considering the size of your team, it's an impressive result that you and your whole crew have put together. Thank you for your investment in the community. Thank you for investment in Auckland, and thank you for promoting Aotearoa New Zealand on the world stage. Thank you for your investment in sustainability. And finally, I would say, may the Garden of Eden go well for the All Blacks and the All Whites later in the month. So thank you.
Comment on my part, Madam Chair?
Councillor Walker, I've got you after Councillor Fletcher. Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you.
I want to keep my comments somewhat brief because I think that there is wide acceptance in this room for the significant role that you play in part of the promotion of Auckland. But may I, at a personal level, to both your chair who's present online and yourself, Nick, thank you as a local resident in Mount Eden for the careful way in which you have woven Eden Park and the activities into the lives of the community, doing a great deal to heal the differences that were experienced in the past. 20 years ago, there was often open warfare between the community and the park and the activities that were held. While I don't pretend that everybody today is perfectly happy, I think you have gone out of your way to understand the importance of having that community as your champions. And the work that you've undertaken within the community, as well as that regionally, nationally, internationally, I think needs really special recognition. It's been an honour to work with you, and I really wish you well with all of these events that are moving ahead. But thank you, Doug, thank you, Nick, and your team for everything that you have done, because it might look easy on the surface, but I know how much hard work has gone on behind the scenes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I think the order on the chat might have put Councillor Watson first and final comment from Councillor Walker. Councillor Watson.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Just a couple of brief comments. I mean, and they go to the presentation today, and certainly from a Auckland Inc. perspective, the offering of content that's coming up with Eden Park over the next year and a half is just phenomenal. We have we've had the magnificent season with the Blues. We've had the Irish Test. We've got the MPC games going on. Then we have the Black Ferns and All Blacks double header in September. The All Whites soccer Australia. And all this time that the MPC is still going in October 8. We have the Rugby World Cup opening matches, semi-finals, finals. Then we have that's no sooner finished, and then along comes 660, the cricket, Billy Joel, Guns N' Roses, Ed Sheeran in February. Again, international cricket with Sri Lanka. Then, we start to hit July next year, and we have the FIFA Women's World Cup, opening ceremonies and group matches, and so forth and so on. So it's really, I think, as Nick said, an unprecedented period of content that that really, I think, has the opportunity to go to, to reinvigorating Auckland, to take us out of the kind of struggles of the last few years. And I just really would like to put on a record, certainly my appreciation as an Auckland councillor for the manner in which the team at the Trust have managed to pull this amazing offering of content together over this next year and a half. It really is phenomenal. And of course, as anyone that goes along to Eden Park knows that the venue and the fan experience is always top class. As Councillor Walker alluded to, in the future, that access and experience is going to be improved even further. So I think, in amongst the kind of rather sort of gloomy outlook and other aspects of society, it really is uplifting to see this varied content that's being brought through that will act as a real spark to Auckland, not just from a sporting and entertainment point of view, but to the businesses that are able to leverage off this. So it is an exciting time. I certainly look forward to seeing all that varied content rolled out, and I hope Aucklanders getting out there and along to the park, our national stadium, and making the most of it. So thanks again to the Trust for enabling all that.
Thank you, councillor. And final comment is councillor Walker.
Sure, I'd just like to commend Eden Park, Madam Chair, and I would suggest that Eden Park is a shining light as a stadium that is a centre of excellence across a wide range of disciplines that go to Auckland and also New Zealand. I would make the observation that I have a great deal of scrutiny over the finances of Eden Park, and I note that while Eden Park has some assistance from council, if we compare that with the capital injections on an ongoing basis and the operational subsidies for our own stadiums, there is quite a glaring comparison, both historically, presently, and going into the future. And if I refer again to that centre of excellence, Madam Chair, I'd suggest that Eden Park could be well placed to provide some templates for more appropriate comparisons so that we've got better information to rely on, because as much and all as there may be comments around Eden Park, the assessment that I've made is the huge expenditure by way of capital and operational subsidy into our own stadiums is glaring by its negative comparison. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, councillor. Look, again, I just want to say in conclusion, thank you very much for your presentation. It's been a tough term. It's been a tough 3 years for you, and you've got some really exciting things coming up. So may it all go very, very well for you. Thank you. Committee members, are there any questions now on the report for Mr. Bishop? No. Okay. Well, it has been moved by myself, seconded by councillor Sayers. I'll now put the recommendation that we thank the representatives of Eden Park Trust Board for their attendance and their information provided. All those in favour say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Against?
Aye.
Kumana, carried. Kent, thank you. Thank you very much, Eden Park. People, we now move on to item 9, which is our early engagement on the 23-24 statutory entity levy funding process, and I welcome to the table Sarah Johnson-Smith with Chris Levitt and Alistair Cameron. Sarah, are you going to open? Thank you.
Ata Marie, tēnā koutou katoa. Good morning, everyone. I'm introducing the report as an author, but I have Alistair and Chris here in support to answer any questions relating to AREFA and the museum specifically. So for context, as you know, under legislation that's specific to each entity, council is required to provide funding to these 3 entities by way of levy payment. And for 22-23, this totalled 67.8 million, or about 3.4% of general rates. So there are very positive relationships that exist between council and these entities, reflecting the contribution that they provide to Auckland. However, as the primary funder, council has relatively few tools for accountability and performance monitoring of these entities. The legislative processes and the timeframes for the entities to develop their levy requests, prepare their draft annual plans or a funding plan in the case of the Amenities Funding Board, consult on them and then finalise their levy request to council. They precede our own planning and budgeting processes by some months. So when council approved, was this committee actually, approved this year's levy requests for the entities, the committee resolved, amongst other things, for staff to work closely with these entities at an early stage of the 2023-24 processes. So the 3 entities will be consulting on their draft annual plans and finalising them anywhere over the period from October right through to January of next year, which has driven the timing of this report to you now. So as independent entities, council cannot direct the museum or MOTAT or AREFA, but can make requests for their consideration, which is what this report does. So these requests centre around some general messages for the 3 entities and also some messages specific to each entity. I'll take those largely as read, they're detailed in the report, but just note that the general messages centre on a couple of things, including council's financial position for FY24 and beyond and the very real challenges that exist there. A request for the entities to take steps to improve their draft annual plan or funding plan consultation processes. Historically, that has been quite low in terms of the number of submissions for some of these entities, and looking for them to take some steps to encourage some more productive engagement in that space. And then we're also requesting that the entities come to the relevant committee of the new council at a suitable time to update on their financial and non-financial performance. And also importantly, that there's a separate strategic engagement between the relevant committee and each entity on their sort of 3 to 5 year planning horizon, the opportunities, challenges and other issues which we think would be welcome. And finally, for its part, council can also support these entities in terms of promoting the activities and the services they provide, but also the awareness of council's funding contribution to those entities. As we've outlined in the report, we can do that in a number of ways, through council's website, our planning documents, etc. And another method we could utilise, which again is proposed in the report, that we could utilise the November rates instalment and an information tile that we have on there to highlight the contribution that council makes and provide a link to more information there about the entity's consultation processes, the activities and services they provide, etc. And I think that's recommendation F of the report. Finally, I'd note council staff have worked with the 3 entities and provided an opportunity for them to review the draft report, and edits were made as a result of that to reflect their feedback. So kia ora, thank you, and we're happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Sarah. For those of you online, when she mentioned a recommendation F, that's only because we have pushed it all down by adding a new A, which is a stating the obvious about what the levy budget is for the 22-23 year. So we open now for questions. Deputy Mayor, first one from you. Thank you.
Thanks, and thanks, Sarah, for the presentation and the explanation. My question is quite simple. The legislation that sets up the funding compulsion in these areas, when was that done in statute?
It varies between each entity. ARAFA was the last one to be enacted, I think just prior to amalgamation, and the Museum and Motat Acts predate that by some time.
Would it be fair to say then that they're possibly a little bit pre-amalgamation and post-amalgamation is a different world, and they should the legislation should be, we should be advocating for it to be advanced into the modern era?
I might take that because that seems to be verging into the political. What we can say is that the legislation was all enacted pre-amalgamation, and one of the focuses of the legislation of all 3 pieces was to get a contribution out of all of the former councils towards the costs of these entities. I'll leave the rest to you.
Thank you.
I think you've made your point, Deputy Mayor, and I support that. Question from Councillor Fletcher.
How many terms of council have we been advocating for this legislation to be repealed, Alistair?
I'm not sure if there's ever been a specific recommendation. I know there's always been discussion suggesting this, but there has never been an explicit recommendation of council for staff to work on with central government or these entities themselves on the repeal of this legislation. So there's been discussion, but I don't think any formal recommendation.
As somebody who has raised this issue since 2010, I wonder whether today could be a day where we make such a recommendation in terms of advocacy.
Well, that's a good point. Your Worship, I think in the back of my mind that you have done this.
Yeah, I'm just trying to remember. I specifically raised it with the Minister that this is anachronistic legislation, was necessary when 8 squabbling councils couldn't reach agreement on how to fund the museum, Motat and our key amenities. It's no longer necessary, and it's, in my view, an unnecessary intrusion by central government directing council as to how it should carry out its relationship with bodies that it overwhelmingly funds. I think the response, if I recall rightly, I got back ministerially was, yeah, there may be a case to make, it's just not a priority for us at this time. But at some point, I think that legislation, as soon as the government is prepared to do it, that legislation should be repealed because it no longer fulfills any valuable purpose. It's unnecessary. and we would have a better relationship with the museum, MOTAT and the amenities if it was a direct relationship determined bilaterally rather than with central government direction through statute.
Councillor?
I thank the Mayor for his explanation. This has been a matter that has been discussed on every single opportunity when the matter comes before the Council. Madam Chair, I wonder whether you would give consideration today to actually having formally included in the recommendations before us the need for focused advocacy to actually request from the government a change to this legislation.
Look, I'm happy to do that. This is about the early engagement in our statutory entity funding process for this year. But I'm still happy to do it. I think, you know, if we haven't done it formally for a while, it wouldn't hurt.
I would truly appreciate that,
Okay,
because
so
on
can you
every
just give me a-
occasion I have asked for this to occur, there has been a reason why we couldn't do it. And I think it would be good at the conclusion of this term of council for an incoming council to actually have this as a decision of this committee.
If you want to write something and bring it up to the front, I'm happy to have it included.
Madam Chair, maybe I could just suggest an amendment, because I was thinking along the same lines as Councillor Fletcher, and it would be something like continue advocacy to central government for the repeal of redundant legislation relating to the relationship between council and the Auckland War Memorial Museum, MOTAT, and the amenities covered by the ARAFA.
Right, Your Worship, if you'd just like to come over here and talk to Sandra, we will get that typed up while we have another question from Councillor Casey. All right, just bear with us, Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that very comprehensively deals with this matter and gives a sense of direction to our officers.
Thank you. Right, we have a question from Councillor Casey. Oh, sorry, do you want me to
Thanks,
ask
Madam
it
Chair. Could you ask it for me, please?
Certainly. Hold the line. Councillor Casey has a question for Alistair about potential change to the Fire and Emergency New Zealand Act 2017, the Act and the associated regulations that could significantly increase the operational costs of our publicly funded galleries and museums like MOTAT.
All I can say is at this stage is that I'm aware there are some proposed changes. I think Marie Laurent from Tautaki Auckland Unlimited is trying to coordinate a submission or a response to the government on that, because my high-level understanding is it will increase the fire service levies to museums, and given our role as a funder in that space will have a direct financial implication on us.
All right with that, Councillor? I think I'll take that as a yes. I'll just have a couple of minutes break, people, just while we get the recommendation, what are we up to, F, G, ready. So just give me a couple of minutes. Thank you. The Mayor's recommendation, wording, thanks to Councillor Fletcher, and legal have checked it, so I'm happy where that is. Councillor Fletcher, you're happy to therefore move all the recommendations?
Madam Chair, I'm happy to move the recommendations.
And
I thank the Mayor for the inclusion and believe that this will give a significant improvement should the government choose to adopt our recommendations in terms of the investment that Auckland is making in the arts and cultural sector and greater accountability.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments, Your Worship?
No, I'm happy to second that. I think probably staff and all councillors would be in agreement with that.
Can we just scroll it? Thank you. Continue political advocacy to central government for the repeal of redundant pre-amalgamation legislation governing the relationship between council and the Auckland War Memorial Museum, Museum of Transport and Technology, and the amenities covered by the Auckland Regional Funding Amenities Act 2008. Right, okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any final comments? I will then take it to the vote. All those in favour say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Against?
What?
And carried. Thank you. Thank you very much, Alistair, to you and your team, Sarah. And Chris, thank you for your work over the last 3 years. It's been amazing. It's been incredibly tough. We've had some very tough conversations we've had to have with these groups over the past 3 years, and the work that you and your team, Alistair, have done has been amazing. So thank you very much. Right, we now... I should have acknowledged it. Right, but I didn't. Now we move on to item 10, which is the Statement of Investment Policy and Objectives of the Self-Insurance Fund, and we welcome back Mr Bishop and Vasha. Thank you.
Kia ora, everyone.
Look, thank you, Madam Chair. So this paper relates to the Self-Insurance Fund, the establishment of which was approved by this committee back in October last year. We have appointed Russell Investments as the fund manager, and with them we have developed a Statement of Investment Policy and Objectives, or a SIPO for short. And the intention of this document is to outline how the investments in the self-insurance fund will be managed. This policy, which you see in front of you today, has been endorsed by our internal insurance management steering group. And just to remind you, that consists of representatives from council, all the CCOs, and 3 independent members. Now, the goal of the SIFO is to achieve both long-term growth in the value of the assets, but also maintain sufficient liquidity to pay any claims which come due. What you see from the policy, it's a fairly standard approach to investment, split 50-50 between really income and growth assets. The SIPO also includes a responsible investment policy that's based on a best endeavours approach, which recognises our limited ability to exclude some securities from the portfolio. Assuming this is approved by the committee today, we would look to capitalise the self-insurance fund around the 1st of October, and then we would report back to this committee on a quarterly basis on both the the performance of the self-insurance fund, including the investment performance. Madam Chair, I'll probably pause there and hand back to you for any questions.
Okay, any part I? No? Well, look, that's always good. It means that it's self-explanatory. Any comments? I'll just make a comment. I'll just reiterate that, of course, the reporting, including performance against agreed benchmarks, will be provided to whatever the Finance Committee looks like next term in a quarterly manner, and the IMSG monthly. So I want to thank you for your work that you have done putting this together. It's a very responsible paper, and I wish it really well. So I'd like to move, and I will ask Deputy Chair to second, and then take it to the vote. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. We move now to item 11, which has 3 disposal recommendations, and I welcome to the table Anthony Lewis from Ekipanuku, Matt Casey and Letitia from Ekipanuku. Oh no, just Letitia and Nats. Welcome.
Good morning. Unfortunately, Matt's off sick today, so he does tender his apologies. Good morning. Thank you. As the Chair has kindly mentioned, we have 3 properties which have no public work requirement, and we are recommending their disposal to the committee. Just to go through some of the points, we have undertaken the normal asset recycling process of discussing with the wider council group, engaged with mana whenua, local boards. We've informed ward councillors of the impending recommendations and the IMSB. Property-specific information. The subject part of 33 Brandon Road has been released by Council's Healthy Waters Department as no longer required for stormwater retention purposes. It's part of a larger site which will remain in council ownership. The parts remaining in council ownership have stormwater detention ponds. We have engaged with the Waitakere Rangers local board. The board has resolved that they oppose the disposal. They seek to retain it for recreation purposes. Ekipanuku has responded to the board with a joint statement from Council's Land Advisory Services saying the subject 584 metre part has not been identified for recreation purposes. There are large reserves within a couple of hundred square metres of the site. Retaining it would mean there's no street frontage, so there are potential SIPTED issues. It also would be adjacent to stormwater retention ponds, which would be a safety issue. There's only quite a low 1 metre high fence, so its retention for that purpose is not supported. The other sites are 17 Erston Avenue, which is a small 603 square metre car park behind commercial properties on Mount Albert Road. AT has released it as not being required for its purposes. They have legalised the adjacent service lane that will remain in council ownership. The primary users of this car parking area are the adjacent gym, pub and tennis club. Should the committee approve the disposal, we will seek or follow up any interest from those adjacent property owners if they seek to acquire it. The final site is 2 Levine Place, which is a large commercial property originally acquired by Auckland City Council for the Waipuna road widening project. AT have released it as that project is no longer progressing. The property is subject to a number of covenants and restrictions in terms of development and activities on the site in favour of the former developer. So that former developer has any say on what future use occurs on the site, where driveway entrances are. So it is very restricted in terms of future council use or any development in the private sector. So that has been released. The Mangakiki Tamaki local board has been consulted. They support the disposal of those 2 sites. And happy to take any questions. Thank you. Oh, sorry, one couple more points. The valuation for Brandon Road is a pro rata assessment based on the square metrage of the rest of the site, which is a stormwater asset, hence the low valuation. If the committee does approve the disposal, we will undertake a couple of valuations prior to any offer to the adjacent landowner, who is the successor in title. Those valuations will be based on what value that would provide to the adjacent owner's development, rather than just on per metre valuation. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question first from the Deputy Chair and then Councillor Fletcher. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And my question, just directing colleagues to paragraph 4 of the executive summary, which I think summarises things fairly well. But I'm wondering if staff can comment more on the potential SIPTED and safety issues of the Brandon Road site.
Yes, through the Chair. So obviously it doesn't meet the minimum size requirement for a pocket park. It's down a long, narrow driveway with no street frontage. If it's retained for recreation purposes, that would be the only legal access. It would back onto private properties from the adjacent side. There's no public access that way. The fence is only about 1 metre high, and across the fence are quite deep stormwater retention ponds. So you've got SIPTED issues and potential safety issues with children down a long driveway with no overseeing visibility and those ponds which are there.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Fletcher.
Oh, thank you. I just want to ask around the Urson Avenue property in Royal Oak. It's primarily used for car parking at the moment, and Auckland Transport have felt comfortable in releasing it for sale. Can you just take me through an understanding? And I can see why this is being put to us as a recommendation, but I just want the comfort of knowing that the car parking provisions, because as I understand it, it was the Legacy Onehunga Borough Council or somebody or another that determined that there was a need for car parking in that area. So could you just expand a little more fulsomely on whether you in releasing this feel that there is adequate car parking in that area and what the views of the local board were?
Yes, through the chair. So that's correct. The former Onehunga Borough Council originally acquired the site, and the service lane was built in 1988, I believe. AT have only just formally legalised the service lane as a road in 2020. AT have undertaken their own assessment as part of their own internal property optimisation work. They've consulted all their departments, including parking, including the elected member relationship team, the future strategy team, all departments. They believe they have no future use for it. It's not primarily used as a public car park. It's pretty much exclusively used by adjacent businesses and retail units. So they believe it has no impact on public car parking due to its current use. If you have a look at the aerial, I don't know what page it is, part of the car-formed car park is actually on privately owned land owned by the tennis club.
I'm familiar with it.
Yeah.
And the local board are supporting this?
Yes, fully consulted with them, responded to questions. Their main questions were about the future use of it, what could occur. Because of the nature of the site, any standalone development is unlikely to occur. It would have to be a property owner who owns adjacent shops to possibly incorporate it.
So maybe the hotel, the
gym,
there,
yeah,
or the gym or someone. Yeah, no. Well, thank you for your work on that, and thank you for the explanation and the confirmation that the local board support this.
Not a problem.
Thank you, Councillor. Your Worship.
Yeah, I think you've just answered my question. The only looking at the Urson Avenue car park, which I'm familiar with, the only likely purchaser of that would be the commercial premises that currently use it. We pay for it and they use it privately, so that would be where the sale would likely go.
Through the chair, we do have we have registered.
Okay, so it makes absolute sense that they're using it as if it was theirs. They might as well pay for it. Thank you.
You and Councillor Fletcher are having a very unusual mutual thinking. Yeah, it must be back here, I don't know. Any other questions? Any comments? I'd like to then move the recommendations. I'll ask the Mayor to second. And with no further questions or comments, I will put it to the vote. All those in favour say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Against?
Aye.
Carried. Thank you. We move now to item 12, the adjacent 176 Princess Street West Pukekohe, and the local government consultation around that. Letitia, do you want to lead off?
My colleague Andrew Alcote, who has led work on this.
Okay, Andrew, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you and good morning. Yes, we're here to present a report that seeks confirmation from the committee on a 2019 resolution to dispose of the property adjacent to 176 Princess Street West in Pukekohe, subject to relevant statutory clearances, and this was approved as part of Eki Panuku's Unlock Pukekohe High Level Project Plan. For background, the property was acquired as part of a larger block in 2001, but it was always intended to be sold. So the balance of the block is classified under the Reserves Act as Recreation and Drainage Reserve, while adjacent 176 is held under the LGA. Given the 20-year gap and the property's relationship with the neighbouring reserve land, It's been deemed that it meets the definition of a park under the LGA, and it's therefore subject to the disposals process outlined in section 138, which requires the completion of public consultation prior to sale. Eke Panuku has now completed a month's worth of public consultation, placing notices in the local newspaper, on the council's website, and letters were sent to adjoining owners. One submission was received, as outlined in the report, and this was primarily a purchaser inquiry. The local board continued to support the sale, and the recommendation is for the committee to confirm the previous decision to dispose.
Thank you, Andrew. I'll open now for questions. Deputy Mayor, would you like to move this?
Happy to, Madam Chair, so well done.
And Your Worship, would you like to second? Yep. Any comments? Oh, thank you very much on behalf of us all, emulating the Deputy Mayor's very short and succinct words as per usual. So thank you for your work team around this, and it's been moved and seconded, so I'll now take it to the vote. All those in favour say aye.
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 Against?
Aye.
Carried. Thank you. We now move to item 13, and this is around asset recycling properties that are now not going to be on the list. So,
Good morning again. Yes, thank you. Eke Panuku are recommending that 10 properties be removed from the asset recycling program. This is following extensive property investigations, consultation with the wider council group, which identified a number of issues with some of the properties. Other properties have been recommended for retention following public notification engagement with mana whenua and local boards, and where independent hearing commissioners appointed to consider submissions received have recommended revocation not occur. This has been followed up where this was reported through to the Parks, Arts, Community and Events Committee, and they've also resolved that revocation of a number of sites should not proceed. As such, the council is unable to dispose of those properties. This obviously will have an impact on council's financial figures of approximately $8 million, but through the asset recycling program, Eke Panuku will work with the Value for Money team to find other properties that can be recommended for sale to make up for the shortfall. We will inform a number of mana whenua entities who registered opposition to the disposal or the revocation of the reserve status of a number of sites. We will follow that up. And long-term implications are that these will continue to be managed by council, and a number of properties which are parks or such will then be governed by local boards as part of their local parks network. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Anthony. The first question I have is in the name of Councillor Newman. Councillor Newman has a question for you on Kenny Court. Councillor Newman.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Chair. My question to Panuku, so this follows the release of the Commissioner's findings from Plan Change 60, which have already dealt with to Kenny Court. In the report, it refers to further review undertaken by Parks, Sport and Rec and then Advisory Services to retain the open space. That's good, and I support all of that. Can I just understand that because it wasn't the advice previously that the officers felt that this was an open space, or this was a park that was required, that was deemed surplus, but can I just be ensured that actually what we will do now is we'll put this park back into the schedule and we will mow and maintain it, because I actually think that the impetus for this has been driven by the commissioners for Plan Change 60 rather than us having a belated review of the status of the park itself. I just want to make sure that we actually do pick up the consequential operating cost of maintaining this particular pocket park, because it is important and the commissioners deem that it is too. I know that what we're proposing here is to retain it as open space, but we need to ensure that we address the consequential cost of the retention of that, which I strongly support, but I just want assurance that that will happen.
Yes, through the chair, if I could firstly clarify, We actually withdrew this property from the reserve revocation process, which councillors may recall from when it went to the PACE committee. That was following feedback that we received through the public notification period that we thought warranted further investigation, and it was on that basis that Eke Panuku referred this property back to council and asked that it be reviewed again. Now, it did end up being included in Plan Change 60, and because the local board were in attendance on that day, the commissioners did hear them, but we had already withdrawn it from the reserve revocation process, and we did advise the commissioners at the time that we were withdrawing it from the process. Following our withdrawing this from the reserve revocation process, we have worked with the Parks team, or Parks and Community Facilities team now at council, and we have sought confirmation from them that they are prepared to continue to manage and maintain this property on an ongoing basis. And so that is the basis of our recommendation, and we can confirm that maintenance will be undertaken. If there are any issues with that and going into the future, we would ask that those are directed to the Parks and Community Facilities team.
Thank you, Chair. It's a really good outcome. It's up to the next local board and Papakura to ensure that maintenance schedule is adhered to, because it's an important local park for those people. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Next question, Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, and I'm happy to move these because there's good reasons why they should be removed. And my question is around the, was it 8.36 million possible that we won't be able to realise in our asset recycling program. You said we'd have to find other places. Have you got properties you're working on? Possibles?
Through the chair, yes. There's a lot of work going into that at the moment.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Mayor Goff.
Yeah, thank you very much for the report, and by and large, you know, I agree with it on the basis that we've done due process and we've found reasons not to sell. The one that I'm curious about is the corner of Aspiring Avenue and Hilltop Road, because I drove by it this morning, as I frequently drive by it. In the 1,000 times I've driven by it, I've never seen a single person occupying the park, and I thought it was prime land for redevelopment. Now, you say that you have planning advice that there are restrictions from the national grid, I presume you're talking about the power, and then airspace restriction and aircraft noise, but all around it are housing. And I just cannot understand why there are restrictions on this land that wouldn't equally apply to the houses that surround this block, and it's $2.5 million worth, so it is a sizable return if we were to sell it. Can you just explain to me why those restrictions apply to this land and not to the land around it?
Through the chair, sorry, I'm not a subject matter expert on this by any means, but I believe some of the power grid restrictions came in only recently, probably the last 10 years, probably around the same time as the unitary plan. So those restrictions obviously followed the establishment of those existing subdivisions.
Yeah, it's still not rational that you can't build on that, but you can build in the 363 degree radius or circumference around it. The only point I'd make, Madam Chair, if we're not able to develop and that is set in place, then future council should think about doing something with it, because having a bare block of land that costs money to mow and doesn't have any attraction for people to use doesn't make sense to me.
Very cool. So I think we had a mover in Councillor Cooper. I'm happy to second. With no further questions, do we have any comments? I think the comment that I would just make in conclusion is we do a lot of investigations around anything that goes up for sale, and this is just one of those perfect examples where we have looked carefully and found reasons why they shouldn't. And so I think that is important to note. These are real, you know, we don't just put it up and think it's going to be fine. We look into it with some detail, so I think that's important. Right, it's been moved and seconded, and I've got no comments, so I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. And so I just want to say thank you to you. It's been a pretty rough ride we've had this term, to Panuku, Eki Panuku, to you, Ants, and Letitia, and all the team. Thank you very much for your hard work and investment in helping us get through a real tough time. Thank you. Item 14 now, and this is a process report, the preparation of our Auckland Council fourth quarter performance report. Karuna, welcome. If you'd like to take us through the report, thank you. Like saying you're on mute, you know?
Kia ora koutou. I'll take the report as read. This is a procedural report that provides quarter four's key highlights and achievements. The more detailed part of the report will be presented as part of the confidential item later on in the meeting. And this presentation will also cover the key financial results given the strict confidentiality requirements until the adoption of the annual report. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I call for questions, I just, for those of you who can see the chair's recs, in the interests of accentuating the positive, as I am wont to do with monotonous regularity when they occur, I have actually taken points 10 and 11, which are the key achievements across the group for the quarter ended from the agenda, and just noted in our resolutions that they are achievements. Right, any questions? They're just straight from the agenda. Any questions?
Oh, have you been to Gleneden?
Have I been to Gleneden? Of course I've been to Gleneden.
Well, I don't think the people there feel they've had achievements on the roads. Just, yeah, because I'm going to be voting for this, but I'm just, as a bit of a rider, that a lot of our community are very upset about some of the improvements. Anyway.
I think the fact that they were completed.
Very good, they're completed on time. No, late, but anyway, it's all right, thank you.
Right. Okay, I think let's quit while we're ahead, okay? I'm happy to move. Deputy Chair, do you want a second? Thank you. I'll then take it to the vote. All those in favour say aye.
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 Against? Carried. Thank you. We move now on to item 15, which is the preparation of our draft Auckland Council annual report. Tracy, welcome, and Francis, would you like to take us through the process paper? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This also is a procedural report. It's about the preparation of the draft annual report and summary annual report for the 21-22 financial year. So the governing body will be asked next week to adopt, the week after, the 29th, to adopt these reports. And just a reminder that they are a legislative requirement, but they're also prepared so that we can be transparent about our finances and operations for investors. They are prepared by council and audited by Audit New Zealand on behalf of the Auditor General. At the time that we wrote it, and still, there was one outstanding issue with audit, and that relates to the audit of greenhouse gas emissions. They are reported in Volume 1, and audit has determined that they are material measures, and it's taken some time to close that out. And I'll take the rest of the report as read, and through the chair, I welcome any questions.
Thank you, Tracy. Francis, anything more you want to add? No? We're going to talk about it later, so. Yeah.
No, we'll talk about it later.
Any questions? No, I'm happy to move. Deputy Chair, do you want a second? Thank you. Any comments? All I can say is bad timing, real bad timing. Day after the last governing body meeting, we released this. It's not done before. I tried my hardest, didn't I, Peter?
Certainly did.
I can do a lot of things, but I can't move mountains. I'll have to keep trying. Sorry, that was a bit flippant. It's been moved and seconded. Thank you much for your work. And again, thank you for your work in public over all our quarterly reports and our annual report over this term. Really appreciate the work, Francis, that you and your team have done. Thank you very much. I'll take it to the vote then. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Thank you. Item 16 is a summary of the Finance Performance Information Memoranda and briefings, including the Forward Work Programme. Do we have a seconder, Deputy Chair? Thank you. Any questions or comments? No, I'll take it to the vote. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Thank you. Before we go into confidential and at the end of our public session, I'm going to take a chair's right just to say a few words. You don't need me to tell you that this term has been, without doubt, the most challenging financial term in the history of Auckland Council. I want to first acknowledge Team Auckland that we gave birth to and the spirit that has come together as a result of those challenges associated with the international pandemic of COVID and one of the most significant droughts in Auckland's history. Climate changes, rampant inflation and increased interest rates. None of these things were on our agenda 3 years ago. But our collective Team Auckland decision-making has actually dealt with them all. I want to particularly acknowledge our local boards who joined us for many of our workshops and willingly came to the table to understand and positively help with the challenges and decision-making elected members were required to make. It was a true shared governance. And I want to acknowledge that for many of us, those decisions were made in our homes, on our own, and whilst we all got used to remote technology. We have put in over 268 hours of workshops and 118 hours of meetings this term, a total of 386 hours. And despite the challenges, nobody's walked out, lost their cool, or had a bit of a tanty. So committee members, thank you, because the work that we've done has been tough. Committee, it's absolutely incorrect to say we have not taken a prudent and responsible approach to managing our finances. We have. And we have done so while still investing substantially in the infrastructure, facilities and services that Auckland needs. Now, we're not perfect, but in true Desley style, I would like to remind you of some of our achievements. Not all, but some. We've actually produced not 3, but 4 consultation budgets to adjust to the financial pressures that came our way and to stimulate economic recovery. Our decision-making has always reflected the majority of feedback from Aucklanders when consulted. We've delivered capital investment programs of more than $6 billion. Noting that Auckland Council has saved $2.4 billion to date, we've achieved operational savings and efficiency achievements in excess of $260 million. We've achieved group procurement savings of just under $150 million. We've raised just shy of $2 billion in green bonds, the first organisation in New Zealand to raise money this way. We've saved in excess of $12 million in IT services, and I really want to take this time to acknowledge the role that Mark Denver played in that. A man gone too soon. Thank you, and rest in peace, Mark. Our value for money achievements have totalled, and you haven't seen this figure yet, our value for money achievements have totalled in excess of $528 million. Now, just in case you don't know, that's over $500 million. That's what our value for money achievements have totalled this term. We've been able to widely use debt to fund growth, while keeping our debt to revenue ratio well within the group's 90% policy limit, noting our current debt is only 16% of our assets and now well below our pre-COVID level of 270%. As for our rates increases, we have never had the highest average general percentage increase of any council in New Zealand. Currently, we are fourth after Tauranga, Wellington and Dunedin. And in doing all the above, we've maintained investor confidence as reflected in our credit ratings with S&P Global Ratings and Moody's Investor Services of AA and AA2 respectively, both with a stable outlook. We can also be proud that despite the many difficulties of this term, we've been able to continue to deliver our programs of transport, housing and environmental infrastructure that is needed to prepare our city for a population that, according to Statistics New Zealand, is still projected to top nearly 2 million by 2030. This work has included progress on the Central Interceptor by Watercare, progress on the City Rail Link, the first stage of the Eastern Busway has been completed, the reopening of the new Puanui station and upgraded Otahuhu station, the opening of the new Lynn to Avondale shared path, Tamaki Drive cycleway, and of course the Northern Busway extension. In our local communities, we've successfully delivered more than 170 environmental projects for our local boards. And we've delivered projects that are changing the shape of our city, like the new coastal space on the waterfront, the Te Kamititanga Public Square on Queen Street, and our new downtown ferry terminal. Mayor Goff, thank you for giving me this chair role. When I agreed, I never thought it would be quite as tough as it has been, but it's been an honour and a privilege. Thank you. To Team Auckland and the committee especially, it's been a wild ride, hasn't it? But I thank you for your willingness to work together to get us through this challenging 3-year period. To my deputy, Shane, thank you for all you have done. You've certainly cut your teeth as a councillor and deputy chair of this committee on the toughest financial term we've ever had. But finally, I want to thank our staff. This term we have had 3 CFOs, but I want to particularly thank you, Peter, for your guidance and support. So to your finance division, the legal division, keeping us safe, communications, and boy is that an effort getting anything positive out from them, but great work team trying, democracy and engagement, and actually council staff right across our staff and our CCOs. Thank you for your professionalism and hours of work at all hours of the day and night you put in, especially during the emergency budget. Sandra, to you, thank you for the cups of tea and the ginger crunch, although there's no ginger crunch today. You don't know until you chair a committee of the whole how important your people on your right are. Look, ladies and gentlemen, I recognise that we could not have made the achievements we've had without a major collective effort from across the group. So it gives me great pleasure. And I must also acknowledge the CSA team. Every council will know behind us all a great CSA team. I've had a staff of a whole lot, but I specifically want to mention Marika, Tamsin, Rachel and Jamie. So it gives me great pleasure, and I must say a sigh of relief, to sign off as your Finance and Performance Chair for the term. Thank you.
Chair, would you mind if I jumped in and said a few words too?
Certainly.
Very unusual, I know. Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, look, I want to first and foremost thank you and acknowledge you, Chair Simpson, for your tireless service as Chair of this committee. I'm sure when you agreed to take the role, you thought that, you knew it was going to be hard, but you didn't know it was going to be this hard. And when I got the phone call from Mayor Goff to be your deputy, I thought, well, what a fantastic promotion. I don't know if I feel that way anymore. But you may not have expected to lead this committee through a public finance crisis of droughts and COVID-19 and to get out the other side stable and healthy, which is just a fantastic endorsement of your chairship. If I may adapt a common whakatauki for Te Wiki o Te Māori, mā whero mā kahurangi ka o te ai te mahi, with red and blue the work will be complete. And I want to acknowledge that Team Auckland approach that you have started, and that I hope the successor committees continue on in that legacy. Lastly, I just want to acknowledge as well the staff that have worked so hard. Peter Gudsell, the holders of your role in the past, and your entire team. I've seen the lights at night when you go past Albert Street, working late, working in weekends, making huge sacrifices to keep the city afloat. Tough times are going to continue. We're going to have these problems next term as well, but we're very lucky to have the tireless service of your team to call on as we work to bring our city back to shared prosperity. So thank you and acknowledging you.
Thank you very much, Deputy, Your Worship.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and very briefly, you've acknowledged all of the team and appropriately, and I won't repeat those acknowledgements, but a big thank you to everybody right across the council staff, professional staff and elected representatives for what's overwhelmingly been a collaborative approach to dealing with challenges that 3 years ago we didn't imagine would ever happen. The pandemic is the first in a lifetime for all of us, and the impact was pretty devastating. And despite that impact, we've come through with prudent, responsible management of our finances. We've maintained the confidence of the credit rating agencies. We've kept debt well within even our levels set before the crisis, let alone the increased levels that the rating agencies gave us. And we've still been able to deliver on that huge amount of infrastructure. I think you mentioned $6 billion worth of infrastructure. And some councillors here last night were able to get to the second tunnel breakthrough for CRL. And you stand in the cavernous area that's going to be the concourse for the Te Waihoratu station. You watch that machine break through the concrete wall, and you know that when we complete a project that it's going to double the capacity of rail and cater for up to 54,000 people an hour in peak hour ultimately. And you say these are concrete, these are real achievements by the council, notwithstanding the difficult times. But I want to add to your list of thanks, thanks to you personally for your chairing, and to Shane Henderson for being deputy chair. I think that you've helped the collaborative spirit of the committee. Can I adapt a saying of Mao Zedong, who said it doesn't matter whether the cat is black or white as long as they catch mice? Well, it doesn't matter whether members of this committee are blue or red, as long as they get on and do, or green, as long as they get on and do the job. And what we've seen is this council, when other councils have fallen into having commissioners, their infrastructure is broken and still not remedied. I won't name the councils, you know them. We've worked together to get pragmatic responses to real problems, and we've worked on the basis of being evidence-driven, and that is absolutely critical. Any council that doesn't work on an evidence-driven basis, and any council where the councillors aren't prepared to leave their personal politics outside the room and come and find solutions that will make our city a better place and a world-class place to live, it shouldn't be around the table. So my big thanks to you, Madam Chair. We've worked closely together through all of those budgets. I think we've achieved good things for the city in really tough times. So a big thank you to everybody around the table that has contributed in a positive and constructive way that has marked really this committee and the way in which this council has operated. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
Kia ora, and thank you for that. Ladies and gentlemen, that takes us now to the procedural motion to exclude the public, and I will so move. Deputy will second. We will take a 5-minute break. I think we'll just keep going if that's all right. 5-minute break while we swap for those online to the confidential section. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Come back at midday. Thank you.